You blind or just stupid? You almost wrecked my car. You came around that corner too fast. I had to stop. People like you don't belong on streets like this. This is a public street. Move your vehicle. I own this street. Don't put your hands on me. Or what?
The street that belonged to the people. On a quiet suburban street in Oakwood Estates, the tension snapped without warning. You blind or just stupid? You almost wrecked my car coming around that corner. Brian Pike's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and cruel, just before his fist shot forward and connected with Michael Brooks' jaw. The impact made Michael's head snap to the side. Pain flashed across his face, hot and immediate, but he did not strike back. He did not even raise his hands. Pike stepped closer, breathing hard, crowding Michael's space as though he owned every inch of asphalt beneath them. "People like you don't belong on streets like this," he muttered. Michael steadied himself, tasting blood where his teeth had cut the inside of his cheek. His plain clothes hid everything Pike could not see. They hid the years of federal service, the investigations, the discipline, the authority. Pike saw only a calm black man who refused to shrink, and in his arrogance he mistook that calm for weakness. He had no idea that Michael Brooks was not backing down. He was watching, waiting, remembering every word. That morning had begun peacefully. Sunshine warmed the neat lawns of Oakwood Estates as Michael drove his sedan through the familiar suburban streets toward his mother's house. Margaret Brooks lived in the same modest brick ranch where Michael had grown up, the tidy blue-shuttered home she had kept perfect for 40 years. But lately that house had been under attack. 3 city notices had arrived in 1 month. Code violations, they called them. One mentioned peeling paint. Another questioned the front steps. The latest threatened fines if structural issues were not corrected. Michael had read the notices with disbelief. Structural issues? His mother's house had stood solid for decades. That morning he had filled his car with supplies from the hardware store. Porch paint, replacement boards, new house numbers, screws, brushes, everything needed to silence the city's complaints. But as he drove through the neighborhood, something felt different. Curtains shifted as he passed. People paused in their yards. New houses with sharp landscaping stood beside older homes that still carried family histories. Developers had been buying properties in the area one by one, and the block no longer felt like the place where Michael had learned to ride a bike. He was almost at Margaret's house when he heard an engine roar. A black SUV swung around the corner far too fast, crossing into Michael's lane. He slammed on his brakes. The sedan lurched to a stop. The SUV swerved at the last second, missing his front bumper by inches, then stopped sideways across the narrow street, blocking him completely. The driver's door flew open. A tall, broad-shouldered man jumped out, red-faced and furious. He wore designer jeans, a fitted polo shirt, sunglasses pushed up on his head, and a gleaming Rolex that flashed in the sun. His posture was familiar to Michael. Planted feet, lifted chin, shoulders squared. The stance of a man used to command. "What the hell is your problem?" the man shouted. Michael stepped out carefully, hands visible. "No problem here. You came around that corner pretty fast. I had to stop." The man looked him up and down. "I've never seen you around here before." "I'm headed to my mother's house," Michael said. "Margaret Brooks. Blue house. 3 doors down." The man's lip curled. "Brooks? That old place with the peeling paint?" Michael kept his voice even. "That old place has been her home for 40 years. I'm helping her with repairs today." "About time," the man said. "This street has standards now. You people need to understand that." The words landed exactly as intended. You people? Michael had heard it too many times in too many places. "I don't think we've been introduced," he said. The man smirked. "Lieutenant Brian Pike. I live in the new development at the end of the street." A few neighbours had appeared. A woman watering flowers paused with the hose in her hand. An elderly man walking his dog slowed down. A teenager stepped onto a porch with a phone. "Well, Lieutenant Pike," Michael said, "I'd appreciate it if you moved your vehicle so I can get to my mother's house." Pike stepped closer. "You know what I'd appreciate? If people like you learned whose street this is before driving like you own the place. It's a public street." Pike's face hardened. Michael's calmness only seemed to anger him more. "Things work a certain way in this neighbourhood now." "I'm not new here," Michael said. "My mother has lived on this block longer than almost anyone. I grew up in that house." "Well, things change. Neighbourhoods improve, property values go up. Old houses get replaced with better ones." Michael saw the truth forming. This was not just road rage. This was territory. This was pressure. The same pressure behind the violation notices. Then Pike leaned closer and lowered his voice. I own this street. Me and my friends at City Hall. The people who matter. Michael's eyes moved to the heavy Academy-style ring on Pike's hand. He noticed the private security decal on the SUV. He noticed the way neighbours watched but kept their distance. This man was not just angry. He was protected. I just want to get to my mother's house, Michael said. Your mother should have sold that dump when she had the chance, Pike hissed. Horizon made fair offers to all you holdouts. But no, people like you always make things difficult. So that was it. Michael understood immediately. Horizon partners, redevelopment pressure, sudden code violations, police intimidation. His mother had refused to sell, and now the machine was trying to make her life unbearable. Move your vehicle, Lieutenant, Michael said firmly. I have work to do. You don't tell me what to do. Not in my neighbourhood. Pike's body changed. His shoulders tightened. His breathing grew rough. His fists curled. Michael had spent more than 20 years in the FBI. He knew when anger was becoming violence. He could have defended himself. He could have taken Pike down before the man threw a second threat. But he also knew what that would look like to bystanders, cameras, police reports, and men eager to twist the truth. I'm not looking for trouble, Michael said. You brought trouble when you came here with that attitude. Pike shoved him hard in the shoulder. Don't put your hands on me, Michael said, low and controlled. Or what? The street had gone silent. Isabel Rivera, the teenage girl on the porch, held her phone steady. More faces appeared in windows and doorways. An elderly man called out, Officer, please, there's no need for... Pike spun toward him. Stay out of this. Then he turned back to Michael. Something had settled in his eyes. A decision. Last chance, Pike growled. Michael stood his ground. I'm not looking for trouble. Too late. The punch came without warning. It struck Michael's cheek with a brutal crack. Pain exploded through his skull. He stumbled and dropped to one knee on the asphalt. Gasps spread down the street. He hit him! He didn't do anything. Someone call 911. Michael touched his face and saw blood on his fingertips. Every instinct in him demanded a response, but he forced himself to breathe. Pike loomed over him. That's what happens when you don't listen, Pike said. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Pike heard them too. His face changed. The rage drained away, replaced by calculation. He stepped back, adjusted his shirt, and ran a hand over his hair. In seconds, the violent man became a calm, professional officer preparing his story. The patrol car arrived with lights flashing. 2 officers stepped out, hands near their weapons. Officer Hayes took control of the scene while Officer Lopez moved toward Pike. Before Michael could speak, Pike stepped forward. Officer Hayes, glad you're here. We've got a situation. His voice had transformed completely. Controlled, official, convincing. Pike claimed Michael had aggressively approached him after a near collision. He said he had identified himself as law enforcement and used necessary defensive action when Michael advanced on him. Neighbours protested immediately. He's lying. That man in the black shirt punched him. Isabel has the video. Officer Hayes tried to quiet everyone and turned to Michael. Sir, what's your version? Michael wiped blood from his lip. My name is Michael Brooks. Lieutenant Pike cut me off, blocked the street, threatened me, shoved me, then punched me. I never threatened him. He's lying, Pike snapped. Classic attempt to flip the script. Officer Lopez asked if Michael needed medical attention. Michael declined. Then Michael asked to speak privately with Hayes. A few steps away, in a low voice, he said, I should inform you that I'm FBI Special Agent Michael Brooks. My credentials are in my wallet if you need to verify. Hayes froze. FBI? I'm not here in an official capacity. I'm visiting my mother. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Hayes straightened. Lopez looked over. Pike noticed their reaction, and the first trace of fear appeared on his face. Isabel's mother called out that her daughter had recorded everything. Lopez said they would need the footage for the report. Michael could have demanded Pike's immediate arrest. He could have used his authority. But he had spent his life building cases that survived scrutiny. He wanted procedure, witness statements, preserved evidence, a proper record. I'm not asking for special treatment, Michael said. Just proper procedure. The officers took statements. Pike made a phone call in a low voice, away from the others. Then he was allowed to leave in his SUV. The unfinished feeling stayed with Michael as he drove the remaining distance to his mother's house. Margaret Brooks was waiting at the door before he could even knock. At 79, she still stood straight-backed, sharp-eyed and proud. When she saw his swollen face, her expression tightened. "Michael? What on earth happened?" Inside the familiar kitchen, she wrapped ice cubes in a dish towel and ordered him to sit at the same table where he had done homework as a boy. He told her what happened, trying to soften the ugliness, but Margaret knew her son too well. "He said he owns this street?" she asked. "Yes." She sat across from him, her hands folded. "I wish I could say I was surprised." Then she brought out a manila folder. Inside were violation notices, city letters, fines, inspection warnings, and threats. Trash cans visible from the street, mailbox height, garage paint, porch steps, oak tree disease, structural concerns. Every notice carried a different excuse but the same message: comply, pay, or leave. Michael studied the papers with growing anger. Who else is getting these? Mrs. Johnson, the Millers, Mr. Ramirez, Patricia Hayes, Frank Halpern before he left. All of us who have been here for years, all of us who refused Horizon. Then she showed him a business card. Diane Shaw, Executive Vice President, Horizon Partners. "She came by 6 months ago," Margaret said. "Expensive suit, polite smile, offered cash for the house. When I said no, she told me I should reconsider before property values affected my retirement." 2 weeks later, the citations began. Michael photographed every document. The investigator in him took over. This was not just Pike's temper. This was coordinated harassment. Developers, code enforcement, police pressure, and private security working together to force longtime residents out. Margaret told him more. Pike drove slowly past certain homes. Cars at family gatherings were ticketed. Complaints disappeared. Mailboxes were smashed. Homeowners who resisted were buried in fines. The Andersons sold after facing impossible repair costs. The Garcia family left after repeated utility problems. The Lopez family gave up after pressure became too much. "When the police are part of it," Margaret said quietly, "who do you call?" That evening, Michael sat on the porch watching the street. 2 doors down, a "for sale" sign stood in a yard. Across the street, an empty house waited for renovation. His phone rang. It was Sarah, his daughter. "Dad, what happened?" she asked. "There's a video online saying you got into a fight with a cop." Michael opened the link she sent. The clip showed him stepping out of his car and moving toward Pike, but it ended before Pike threw the punch. The caption suggested Michael had confronted local police. He stared at the edited footage, understanding the danger immediately. They were already rewriting the truth. Sarah, a producer with sharp instincts, explained the pattern. First came edited footage, then official language, then public confusion, then doubt. The police department released a statement calling it a mutual altercation between 2 adults that unfortunately escalated. "Mutual?" Michael said, his voice tight. "He sucker punched me in broad daylight." Margaret shook her head. "Nobody will speak up. Not against Pike." She told them about Mrs. Peterson, who complained about Pike harassing her grandson. Afterward, her car was vandalized repeatedly, her insurance dropped her, and she eventually moved away. Michael began writing names and dates. That night, a dark sedan crept past Margaret's house, slowing almost to a stop. Someone inside studied the property before driving away. The message was clear. They knew where Michael was. They were watching. The next morning, a white envelope had been pushed under the front door before dawn. It was another city notice, citing vegetation encroachment and structural maintenance issues. "Third one this month," Margaret said. Michael decided to talk to the neighbours while memories were fresh. Margaret made calls and doors opened. At the river home, Isabel showed him the original video on her phone. It captured everything. Pike blocking the street, insulting Michael, shoving him and punching him. Her mother, Elena, was terrified. 2 officers had come by asking for the footage, claiming they needed to secure evidence. The family had lied and said they had nothing. Eleanor worried about retaliation. Her husband's work permit renewal was pending. They could not risk police attention. Michael did not pressure them. He told Isabel to keep the original safe and not share it yet. Patricia Hayes, an elderly widow, showed him 6 citations in 4 months. Frank Halpern, a veteran, described being denied a wheelchair ramp permit for his wife because of aesthetic concerns, then receiving tickets after speaking at a zoning meeting. Others had similar stories. Every account followed the same pattern: refuse to sell, receive violations, complain publicly, face consequences, stand your ground, get worn down. By afternoon, Sarah arrived at Margaret's house with her laptop and recording equipment. When she saw Michael's bruised face, her professional composure cracked. She hugged him fiercely. Inside, Michael spread out everything he had gathered. Sarah saw the pattern immediately. "This isn't random," she said. "This is an organised machine." Margaret placed coffee on the table. "I've been saying that for months, but nobody wants to hear an old woman's conspiracy theories." "It's not a theory anymore," Michael said. "We're going to prove it." Sarah wanted to go public immediately, using the assault as the headline. Michael refused. He knew that if they made it about one punch, the system would call Pike one bad officer and bury the larger scheme. "We need the whole case," he said, "not just outrage." Sarah argued that delay gave the other side time to destroy evidence. Michael argued that rushing could destroy credibility. Finally, she agreed to wait a little longer. Michael called Thomas Doyle, a trusted FBI colleague. Doyle listened, then warned him that once local players knew Michael was federal, they would get careful. "Careful leaves traces," Michael said. Sarah began following the money. She searched property records, LLC registrations, and corporate filings. 3 properties on the block had sold to different buyers on paper, but all traced back to subsidiaries controlled by Horizon partners. Diane Shaw sat on local boards, donated to campaigns, and moved through city politics like someone untouchable. Margaret admitted that after repeated notices and a broken water heater, she had almost called Shaw to sell just to make the pressure stop. That hurt Michael more than Pike's punch. His mother had survived loss, work, aging, and loneliness, but a machine of fear had nearly made her surrender her home. That night, a patrol car stopped across from Margaret's house and kept its headlights fixed on the property for several minutes before driving away. Michael's resolve hardened. The next day, he and Sarah went to City Hall. In the Code Enforcement Office, clerks hid behind policy and procedure. Inspector Davidson was unavailable. Appeals required fees. Reviews would not happen for weeks. The notice demanded compliance in 72 hours, but no one could explain why Margaret's house had become urgent after 40 years. A nervous young clerk whispered that some addresses received special attention, then backed away when a supervisor appeared. Outside, Michael found a parking ticket on his car, even though nearby vehicles were parked worse and untouched. "They're sending a message," Sarah said. Back at Margaret's house, Doyle appeared on video call with new information. Pike moonlighted for Guardian Security, a private firm tied to several Horizon projects. Guardian was owned by Richard Mercer, a former police chief and head of the police union's legal defense fund, the same network that would protect Pike if complaints were filed. Pike, Guardian, Mercer, Shaw, Horizon, City Hall. The circle was tightening. Then Isabel texted. Police had returned, asking whether the video truly showed everything. They were pressuring her. Sarah realized Isabel's phone might have automatic cloud backup. Even if the original was deleted or altered, the untouched version might still exist. The next morning, Sarah met Isabel and Elena at a coffee shop near the high school. Elena was frightened. Police had told them recording might be illegal, hoping to scare Isabel into silence. Sarah calmly explained that recording in public was lawful, and that Isabel had done nothing wrong. Over time, Isabel trusted her. She checked her cloud account and found the full, unedited video. The thumbnail showed Pike and Michael facing each other in the street. Isabel sent it to Sarah. At the same time, Michael met Robert Ellis, a county records employee, in a quiet diner booth. Robert was thin, nervous, and terrified of being seen. "I shouldn't be here," he said. He slid a flash drive across the table. It contained patterns. Code enforcement complaints against properties on Margaret's block had jumped more than 300%. Spikes followed police reports about quality of life concerns, then violations, then tax reassessments. Every targeted home belonged to someone who had resisted redevelopment. Robert said there were emails too. Horizon representatives meeting with zoning officials and police leadership under the phrase neighborhood improvement planning. In reality, they were identifying which homeowners to pressure next. He agreed to download the emails that night. By midday, Sarah and Michael watched the full video at Margaret's dining room table. Pike's words were clear. "I own this street. People like you need to learn your place." Then the shove. Then the punch. No provocation. No self-defense. No mutual altercation. Sarah had also contacted Jessica, a serious investigative reporter. Jessica wanted to see the footage. Robert would provide emails soon. For the first time, hope felt real. But the next morning, Michael received a call. Robert Ellis was dead. A single vehicle accident, they said. His car had gone off Ridge Road near the reservoir late at night. Preliminary report. Lost control on a curve. Michael knew better. Sarah's face went pale when he told her. Right after he agreed to help us. That's not coincidence. No, Michael said. It's a message. Then Jessica postponed their meeting. Legal had concerns. Someone had leaned on the station. Soon after, Michael's bureau supervisor called. Internal Affairs had received allegations that Michael leveraged his position during a personal dispute. He was placed on administrative leave and told to turn in his credentials. Before he could absorb that, a county inspection van arrived at Margaret's house. 2 inspectors announced an emergency inspection based on an anonymous tip. They pushed through the home and within 20 minutes declared foundation cracks, electrical hazards, and possible black mold. They issued an emergency vacation order. The house was unsafe for occupancy. Margaret had 2 hours to gather essentials. This is fabricated, Michael said. You can appeal, the inspector replied coldly, but the property is closed effective immediately. Then came the sound of breaking glass from the back of the house. Michael rushed to the kitchen and found a shattered window and fresh damage to the porch supports. Vandals, officially, but everyone knew what it was. By sunset, Margaret had packed medications, clothes, and irreplaceable photographs into suitcases. She locked her front door, clutching her keys as if they were the last proof that the house still belonged to her. That night, in a cramped motel room paid for by Sarah, Michael sat by the window, stripped of his badge, his authority, and much of his confidence. I tried to do this the right way, he said, and it only made things worse. Margaret, exhausted but clear-eyed, sat up. Come here, she told him. Michael sat beside her. Decent people lose because they think one truth, plainly told, should be enough, she said. It never is. Men like Pike bury truth under paperwork, fear, and delay. They show people different pieces so no one sees the whole beast. Sarah listened silently. So what do we do? Michael asked. Stop trying to make them admit to one punch, Margaret said. Gather so much proof they can't bury it all. One truth they can crush. 20 truths are harder. Something shifted in Michael. Not comfort, not yet, but clarity. Sarah sat up. She's right. We've been playing their game on their field. By dawn, Michael had written one word at the top of a fresh page. Conspiracy. He met Doyle in a diner at sunrise. Doyle was not supposed to help officially, but he came anyway. The suspension means everything has to be airtight, Doyle warned. No shortcuts. They built a new strategy. Michael would gather written statements from targeted residents. Sarah would map property acquisitions and prepare an independent release plan that no local station could suppress. Doyle would examine database access logs to see whether Pike had used law enforcement systems to pull information on homeowners. By midday, Michael recorded Patricia Hayes describing how violations arrived after she refused a developer's visit. Frank Halpern spoke on record about being driven out despite surviving Desert Storm. He said bitterly that he never expected to be forced from his home by bullies with badges. Sarah received information from Karen Vale, a county records analyst who had noticed the pattern herself. Code actions against 6 properties, aligned with redevelopment bidding windows. That night, Isabel's mother sent a message. You need to see who was outside that house. Attached was doorbell camera footage from the night of Margaret's vandalism. In the motel room, Michael, Sarah, Margaret, and Doyle gathered around the laptop. The grainy footage showed a white Riverside construction truck parked near Margaret's house before the damage. 2 men got out and walked toward her property. Riverside was one of Shaw's regular contractors. A second clip showed Pike's black SUV. Pike stepped out and approached a man coming from the direction of Margaret's backyard. The audio was faint but clear enough. Make sure it looks random, Pike said. Just enough to fail inspection tomorrow. Margaret covered her mouth. They planned it all, she whispered. Doyle then obtained database access logs through a trusted contact. Pike had used law enforcement systems to pull property and personal information on every holdout homeowner on Margaret's block. Addresses, financial histories, driving records. Each search aligned with later visits from Shaw's team or new code violations. This was the bridge. Assault, harassment, property pressure, misuse of official resources, contractor vandalism, witness intimidation, all connected. Doyle sent the evidence package to a federal supervisor insulated from local politics. By the end of the week, Sarah discovered that Diane Shaw was hosting a neighborhood revitalization event on Margaret Street. The flyer showed glossy renderings of luxury townhomes and a new name, Riverside Heights. Pike and Richard Mercer were expected to attend. Perfect timing, Michael said. On the day of the event, the street where Pike had punched Michael looked staged for celebration. White tents lined the sidewalks, banners hung from light poles, catered tables gleamed beneath the sun. Shaw moved through the crowd in a cream suit, polished and smiling, pointing to renderings of a future where Margaret's home no longer existed. Pike stood near the main tent in a tailored navy suit, laughing with councilmen and shaking hands. Richard Mercer drifted through the crowd, steering reporters toward prepared talking points about progress and revitalization. Michael, Sarah, and Margaret watched from a borrowed car half a block away. "He thinks he won," Margaret said quietly. Sarah checked her phone. "Everything's ready." Then the black SUVs arrived. 3 unmarked vehicles swept in from one end of the street. 2 more blocked the other exit. Federal agents stepped out in windbreakers. Conversations died instantly. "Brian Pike," the lead agent called. Pike froze, champagne glass in hand. "This is a mistake," he said loudly, backing away. "What is this?" Agents moved in. Pike panicked. He shoved one agent and tried to break through the crowd, knocking over a display board. He swung wildly, desperate, but agents forced him down onto the same pavement where he had once stood over Michael. "Do you know who I am?" Pike shouted. "You can't do this." "You're under arrest for civil rights violations, conspiracy and witness intimidation," the lead agent announced. Mercer tried to interfere, speaking with the old authority of a man used to controlling rooms. He was cuffed, too. Diane Shaw's polished face drained of colour as agents surrounded her. Wire fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations. Her empire was no longer protected by smiles, donations, or City Hall friends. At that moment, Sarah pressed send. The full story went live. Isabel's unedited video, property records, database logs, witness statements, contractor footage, and evidence of coordinated intimidation. Phones began buzzing throughout the event. Reporters who had come for a redevelopment story suddenly had something much larger. As agents hauled Pike upright, he looked across the crowd and locked eyes with Michael. Only then did he understand. The man he had struck never needed to strike back. Hours later, county officials revoked the condemnation order on Margaret's house. An inspector with kind eyes apologized and stamped the clearance paperwork. "This never should have happened," she said. Margaret took the papers without trembling. About time. The news spread quickly. Pike faced assault charges, civil rights violations, conspiracy, obstruction, and assaulting a federal officer after resisting arrest. Mercer was removed from union leadership and abandoned by former allies. Shaw's company assets were frozen. City officials resigned before noon. Officers began coming forward, admitting pressure to target specific homes. Doyle called Michael. "Your internal review is closing, cleared completely. The Bureau is backing you." But the greatest victory happened on Margaret's lawn. Neighbours who had hidden behind curtains now stepped outside. Patricia brought lemonade. Frank brought a folding table. Others brought chairs, food, and stories they no longer whispered. Children played near the curb without fear. The silence that had covered the block for months broke apart. Sarah arrived with pizza and news that larger networks had picked up the story. A state-level investigation was already being discussed, not just into Oakwood Estates, but into similar patterns elsewhere. As evening came, Margaret stood on her porch with her keys in her hand. She looked at the neighbours gathered in her yard, then unlocked her front door with deliberate calm. "This house was my home yesterday," she said, her voice carrying across the lawn. "It is my home today, and it will be my home tomorrow. No one is taking it from me." The neighbours applauded. Some cried. Dusk settled over Oakwood Estates. Children rode bikes across the same asphalt where Brian Pike had thrown his punch. Michael stood beside his mother, watching wheels spin beneath the streetlights. For months, powerful people had claimed the street belonged to them. They used badges, money, paperwork, fear, and silence. But in the end, the truth had been too large to bury. The street no longer belonged to power. It belonged to people again. This story reminds us that dignity is not proven by how loudly we fight back, but by how firmly we stand when others try to break us. Michael Brooks could have answered Brian Pike's punch with rage, but he chose restraint. He understood that one violent moment was only the surface of something deeper: fear, corruption, greed, and a system designed to make good people feel powerless. His mother Margaret had spent 40 years building a home filled with memory, love, and sacrifice, yet powerful people believed they could erase that life with paperwork, threats, and intimidation. But they forgot one thing. Truth may be delayed, twisted, and buried, but it does not disappear when brave people protect it. The most powerful lesson here is that injustice survives when people suffer alone. Margaret, Patricia, Frank, Isabel, Sarah, and Michael each held one piece of the truth. Separately, they were frightened voices. Together, they became undeniable evidence. That is how real courage works. It is not always a dramatic speech or a heroic fight. Sometimes courage is saving a video, telling your story, opening your door, writing down dates, or refusing to sell the home where your heart still lives. So let this story remind us to never underestimate quiet strength. When someone tries to make you feel small, remember that patience is not weakness, kindness is not surrender, and silence can become powerful when it is used to gather the truth. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen someone stand up against unfair power? Your voice matters. And if you want more emotional stories about courage, justice, and human dignity, please subscribe and stay with us for the next unforgettable story, because the next lesson may stay with you forever today.